You are not becoming less resilient because you are weak. You are becoming less resilient because modern culture has quietly removed the psychological friction that used to train your nervous system to tolerate reality. Quick thing before I unpack that. We are building toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription genuinely helps this channel reach people who actually want the deeper mechanisms, not the slogans. And if this hits a nerve, tap like too, because it tells the algorithm this is worth distributing. Okay, back to the uncomfortable part. You have felt this, even if you never named it. The smallest social tension feels huge. A mild inconvenience can ruin your whole day. You can handle complex work and still feel emotionally fragile. And then you blame yourself, because culturally we frame resilience as a personal virtue. But this is not primarily a character problem, it is a training environment problem. Here is what I have observed, and what a lot of research quietly supports. Resilience is not an attitude you adopt. It is a metabolic capacity your brain builds when it repeatedly meets stress that is controllable, meaningful, and not instantly escapable. Modern culture is optimizing for the opposite: stress that is uncontrollable, meaningless, and instantly escapable. That combination does something very specific to your learning systems. It makes you sensitive, not strong. Let me show you the first mechanism, because it is not the one people think. We assume comfort weakens us because it makes us soft. That is partly true, but the deeper issue is that modern comfort is not just comfort. It is rapid negative reinforcement. That sounds technical, but think about it for a second. Negative reinforcement is when you remove something unpleasant and your brain learns that removal is the solution. Pain appears, you exit. Awkwardness appears, you scroll. Boredom appears, you snack. Anxiety appears, you check for reassurance. The emotional signal is not being processed, it is being evacuated. And the brain is a prediction machine. It learns sequences. So it starts predicting, when I feel discomfort, the correct move is immediate escape. That becomes the habit loop. Not because you are lazy, because your environment rewards the exit with surgical precision. Notice the pattern here. Most modern coping is not coping. It is interruption. You are not metabolizing the emotion, you are cutting the circuit before it completes. Which means your nervous system never gets the data it needs to update its own fear predictions. This is why exposure therapy works for anxiety disorders. Not because it toughens you up, but because it creates new prediction errors. Your brain expects catastrophe, you stay, catastrophe does not happen, and the prediction updates. But if you always escape right when discomfort rises, you never generate the prediction error. Your brain never learns safety. So it keeps escalating the alarm to get your attention. Now here is where it gets interesting. Modern culture does not just provide escape. It provides escape that looks like self-care. This is the second mechanism. We have blurred the boundary between regulation and avoidance. Regulation is when you change your internal state while staying in contact with the problem. Avoidance is when you change your attention so you do not have to be in contact with the problem. The body learns them very differently. A hot shower after a hard conversation can be regulation. A hot shower instead of a hard conversation is avoidance. A walk can be regulation. A walk that becomes a ritual to never answer the email is avoidance. You can even meditate as avoidance, using calm as a sedative so you never have to confront what your emotions are trying to tell you. And because culture is saturated with optimization language, you can avoid your entire life while feeling responsible. You can call it protecting your peace. But what you are actually protecting is your avoidance pattern. If you have ever wondered, why do I do all the right things and still feel emotionally brittle, this is one reason. You are training the skill of exiting, not the skill of staying. And staying is the core microskill of resilience, not muscling through. Staying long enough for your body to complete a stress cycle and discover it did not die. But we are not done, because the next mechanism is more subtle and more damaging. Modern culture has changed what emotions mean socially. Historically, emotions were information in a small tribe. Fear meant danger, sadness meant loss, anger meant boundary violation, and crucially, expressing emotion often led to repair. You cried, someone came, you raged, there was a confrontation, then a resolution. Your nervous system learned emotion leads to contact and closure. Now emotions are content, public, permanent, and judged. This creates what I call performative self-monitoring. You are not just feeling. You are watching yourself feel, imagining how it would look, how it would be interpreted, whether it would be used against you. That second layer is not harmless. It activates the same threat circuitry as social exclusion. The mechanism behind this is a kind of internalized audience. Psychologists talk about the imaginary audience in adolescence, but digital life extends it into adulthood. You carry a social mirror in your pocket. You are never fully off stage. So instead of using emotion as a signal, you treat emotion as a liability. You start pre-editing your reactions. You suppress, you intellectualize, you sarcasm your way out. And suppression is expensive. It increases physiological arousal even when it makes you look calm. Your body stays mobilized. Your mind thinks you are fine. That split is a resilience killer. Let me make it concrete. You have a conflict with someone you care about. In a healthier emotional ecology, you would feel the anger, it would push you toward a boundary. You would talk, it would be messy, then you would repair or separate. In modern culture, anger is instantly moralized. If you express it, you risk being labeled, so you swallow it. But the anger does not disappear. It becomes rumination. It becomes screenshots in your head. It becomes a chronic stressor, which your body reads as unsolved threat. And then you wonder why you cannot relax. It is because your nervous system is holding open loops. Stay with me, because the next piece connects these loops to why people feel exhausted by emotions they barely express. Third mechanism, modern life produces high-frequency micro-threats with no resolution channel. Your brain evolved for chunky stress. Predator appears, you run, you live, or you die, the cycle ends. Modern stress is low-grade and constant. Notifications, status comparison, ambiguous texts, meetings that never conclude anything, economic uncertainty you cannot act on, news designed to outrage you without giving you agency. This creates learned helplessness conditions, but not in the obvious dramatic way. In experiments, learned helplessness happens when an organism experiences aversive events that it cannot control, and later it stops trying even when escape is possible. The modern version is subtler. You experience endless emotional activations that do not map onto effective action. So your system learns, activation does not help. And when activation feels pointless, it becomes intolerable. You do not become braver. You become numb or panicky. This is why people can tolerate physical discomfort at the gym, because it is controllable and meaningful, but cannot tolerate emotional discomfort in a conversation, because it feels unpredictable, socially risky, and unresolvable. The issue is not the intensity. The issue is the control to meaning ratio. Now, I want to do a mid-video flip, because if you think the villain is just comfort and screens, you will miss the deeper trap. The deepest problem is not that modern culture makes you avoid pain. It is that it makes pain feel like a mistake. Read that again internally. Pain feels like an error, not a signal. When a culture treats friction as a design flaw, You start treating your own negative emotions as evidence something has gone wrong with you. So you do not just feel anxiety, you feel anxiety about anxiety. You do not just feel sadness, you feel shame about sadness. That second-order emotion is what collapses resilience. Psychologically, this is meta-emotion, how you feel about what you feel. And meta-emotion predicts outcomes more than the original emotion does. Two people can feel the same anxiety. The one who believes anxiety is tolerable information can move through it. The one who believes anxiety is a sign of personal failure will spiral. Modern culture quietly teaches the second belief. Because everything is curated. Everybody else appears fine. Their pain is filtered or monetized or framed as a triumphant lesson. So when you feel raw, you think you are defective. And defectiveness is social danger. So you hide. And hiding makes you alone with the emotion. And loneliness amplifies threat. It is a perfect self-sealing system. Let me show you another pattern most people never connect. Modern culture has shifted resilience away from communities and into individuals, while simultaneously weakening the individual. In older environments, resilience was distributed. If you lost a job, you still had people. If you got sick, there were rituals, roles, and a sense of belonging that did not depend on constant performance. Today, belonging is conditional on your output, your attractiveness, your vibe, your availability, your correct opinions. So, your attachment system becomes insecure by default. And here is the mechanism. When attachment feels uncertain, your nervous system treats everything else as more threatening. That is not poetry, that is biology. Social safety is a baseline regulator of stress. When it is missing, your arousal threshold drops. Small things feel big. So modern culture weakens resilience in two coordinated moves. It increases baseline threat through insecurity and comparison, and then it provides hyper-efficient escape routes that prevent completion and learning. Not X, but Y. Not life is harder, but your brain cannot finish the stress cycle. Not you need thicker skin, but your environment is teaching your skin to flinch. Now I want to give you a model you can actually use, because otherwise this is just a clever diagnosis. I think of emotional resilience as a three-part system: exposure, interpretation, and closure. Exposure is what you allow yourself to feel and face without instantly exiting. Interpretation is the story you tell about the feeling. Closure is whether the feeling leads to an action, a conversation, a decision, or a ritual that ends the loop. Modern culture attacks all three. It attacks exposure by offering constant interruption. It attacks interpretation by moralizing emotions and selling the idea that discomfort means dysfunction. And it attacks closure by giving you stresses you cannot resolve, then flooding you with more before you process the first. So if you want to know whether your culture is making you fragile, do not ask, "Am I comfortable?" Ask three sharper questions. First, how quickly do I exit discomfort, even in tiny ways? Not dramatic avoidance, micro-avoidance. The moment you feel a spike of awkwardness, do you reach for your phone? The moment you feel bored, do you add stimulation? That is exposure training, whether you like it or not. Second, what do I believe my negative emotions say about me? If sadness equals weakness, you will fear sadness. If anger equals being a bad person, you will fear anger. If anxiety equals incompetence, you will fear anxiety. And when you fear the emotion, you double it. Third, do my emotions end in closure, or do they end in content? Do they end in action and repair, or do they end in a post, a rant, a scroll, a private rumination loop? Here is the part nobody likes, but it is freeing once you see it. A lot of modern emotional intelligence is just vocabulary without metabolism. You can name every feeling and still be brittle if your system never practices staying and closing. So, what do you do with this, practically, without turning it into another self-improvement performance? You rebuild resilience by restoring the missing ingredients: controllable stress, meaningful stress, and non-escapable intervals. That is the training environment your nervous system recognizes. Controllable means you choose it. You pick one hard conversation you have been avoiding and you stay in it long enough to gather new data. Meaningful means it connects to your values, not your image. Non-escapable interval means you remove the instant exits for a short window, so your body has to complete the wave. Start absurdly small. 90 seconds of not fixing the feeling. 90 seconds of letting boredom exist without feeding it. 90 seconds of noticing the urge to check and not obeying it. That is not willpower theatre. That is prediction training. You are teaching your brain discomfort can rise and fall without me escaping. Then add closure. Closure is the secret. Closure is saying the thing, making the decision, grieving the loss, ending the relationship, apologizing, asking for what you want, or creating a ritual that marks the end. Without closure, resilience never builds because your brain never experiences completion. It just experiences endless activation. And if you want one brutal litmus test, if your emotional life creates more drafts than conversations, more inner speeches than real boundaries, more consumption than action, culture is winning. Let me tie it back to the opening, because I promised you a hidden truth. The reason modern culture weakens emotional resilience is not that it makes life easier. It makes emotional learning harder. It replaces real friction with artificial stimulation, and it replaces real repair with public performance. So the goal is not to become a stoic robot. The goal is to become someone whose nervous system trusts itself. Someone who can feel a strong emotion and think, this is data, not danger. If this changed how you see your own fragility, I would genuinely like to hear what part clicked in the comments. And here is the question I want to leave you with, because it will expose the whole pattern the next time you feel overwhelmed. Are you feeling something that needs to be listened to, or are you feeling something you have been trained to escape?